As Lisa said, my name is Nikki Baker Lightmore. I'm married, and I have 2 boys and 1 on the way, so 3 boys, and that's going to be just fine with me. But my background is working in a district attorney's office. I have done that for 10 years. The last 6 years was in Muskogee County, and I did specialize in prosecuting cases that involved child abuse. Most of the child abuse cases were lewd molestations or things of that nature. And what a prosecutor does is a police report comes in from a police department. The prosecutor looks over the report, and if they feel there's enough evidence to file charges, then we do so. We begin to work with the children, and we go from preliminary hearing to jury trial and all the way through, unless, of course, a plea happens before that time. But it's something I'm very passionate about. However, I have a 10-month-old, and it was hard to drive to Muskogee and to continue to leave him at home. So I found a job closer, and I'm here at the Cherokee Nation now. My job there is the director of the One Fire Victims Services Office, and just so you'll know, there we help any victim of any crime, so domestic violence, child abuse, and there's all sorts of funding and grants that we have. So if any of you are ever fall into that situation, or a family member does, don't forget that the Cherokee Nation, just like our local Help in Crisis, has additional funding that could help people in that situation. Further, as part of my job, I do get out and speak, and again, I get to speak about child abuse and just raise awareness. So you're sitting here and you're thinking, well, goodness, I just don't think this is going to happen to me, or why would I really need to know this? Well, if you're a parent, a grandparent, a coach, a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout leader, if you volunteer here in this church, everyone here can benefit from knowing what child abuse is, if you have a duty to report, and then what can you do as an individual to help prevent or save a child from living in that type of condition. This presentation is kind of twofold. I'm going to begin by telling you the awareness of child abuse and lots of statistics and facts, and then we'll move on to prevention on what you can do. I did design a PowerPoint, so some of the slides are going to be small. It wasn't quite up to snuff with how fancy this church's equipment is, but don't worry, I will read you the information and I will inform you, and you also get a handout which should also provide most of the information. So let's get started. One of the first things that I want to do is give credit where credit is due. The information that I'm providing today is from a training called Darkness to Light, Stewards of Children, and it's an evidence-based curriculum in which 95 different sources were used in their research to give the most accurate and up-to-date information about child abuse, and in particularly, we'll talk a lot about sexual abuse. It was given the 2007 Crime Prevention Program of the Year, and that was by the McGruff, the Crime Dog Association. But an award-winning training, I did receive that training and am a facilitator, and again, I just want to give them credit for all of the statistics that you will see. All right, so moving forward, the first thing that I want you to know about is, what is the law? What am I required to do? And of course, we're going to get in to tell you what child abuse is, but the first thing that we should all think about is, do I have a duty to report if I suspect child abuse? And the answer is yes. Every person has a duty to report abuse or suspected abuse in Oklahoma. It used to just be doctors or teachers or things of that nature, and they tried to limit it to certain professions. But the law has changed, and we all have that duty. How you would report it is you would call a DHS hotline, and in your handout you should have that number, 1-800-522-3511. But of course, if you don't have that memorized, you can just simply call the police. Now, if you know that abuse is occurring and you fail to promptly report it, it technically could be considered a misdemeanor, and charges could be filed. Again, that's got to have strong evidence that you knew this was going on and that you just failed to report it. All right, so we all know now that, of course, we have the duty to report. So the next question is, well, what is child abuse? And the law, basically, in the Oklahoma statutes, defines child abuse as harm, threatened harm, and failure to protect a child's health, safety, or welfare by a person responsible for any child under 18. So if a child is left in your care, then that means you. A parent, of course, is always responsible for their own child. So that's what child abuse is, anytime you endanger their health, safety, or welfare. Abuse can be physical, emotional, sexual, or again, just a threatened harm. And lots of situations where there's a threatened harm is where maybe a child lives in an environment where there's feces all over the house, there's rotten food everywhere. Maybe they have knives or drugs where these children can get to them and harm themselves. We see that all the time through a lot of the DHS investigations. So that also is child abuse by having a child living in such horrible conditions. Now, let's watch this video, and I want to give you just a few more examples of what child abuse can be. Now, hopefully you were able to, of course, see the words as they came across the bottom. Again, I know it might be small print, but the examples are physical, sexual, emotional, leaving a child without supervision, even the way you talk to a child, not taking a child to school. You know, this video just furthered the examples of what abuse can be. But I would also like you to realize that it doesn't mention that you can't spank your child. The Oklahoma statute, of course, says that ordinary force can be used for discipline. Ordinary force is usually any amount of force that doesn't leave bruises behind. Once bruises are left behind, you've probably used a little more force than what you needed. Now, that's up to a prosecutor's discretion. For instance, one time I had a parent bruise a child on the rear end. He was trying to drown the puppy, okay? I did not file that. That parent reacted, maybe did leave a bruise or two, but they were trying to instill in their child, we don't do an act like that. So again, prosecutors use their own discretion, but a 6-month-old that has bruises up and down their back, there's no reason for that. So that's something that would be prosecuted. Now, the examples in the video, again, yelling at the child or some of the emotional abuse, maybe those can't all be prosecuted, but those might be grounds that DHS would get involved. So also know that on occasion the abuse is so serious that DHS is involved along with prosecution, and they happen at the same time. But sometimes the parent just needs some additional training or a treatment plan, and DHS will devise that and help those parents correct those conditions. But if you suspect that abuse, you need to at least make that phone call to help that family correct those conditions so that child doesn't have to continue to live in that environment. All right, so as you can see, child abuse can be many things. And what I'd like to talk to you next is about physical abuse. Because if you work in a church nursery or you work around small children, maybe in a daycare, there are going to be signs of physical abuse that you could be looking for. Now, with your older age children that are able to talk, toddlers through 10, 15, maybe even a teenager, studies show that abused children are hesitant to talk to others about the abuse. They might not tell because they love their parent or they love the abuser, whoever it may be. They don't want that person to possibly go to jail. So at times, the child will even try to hide the injury from you because they're scared about what might happen to them or what might happen to the person that is abusing them. But if you are changing diapers or for some reason the children's have short-sleeve shirts on and you can look, there are going to be different signs that you can look for. So here are a few signs as they come up here on the screen. Some of those are unexpected burns, bruises or whelps, bite marks, lacerations. If the child has some antisocial behavior, that might be something that you could look into. If the child wants to avoid contact with others and seems to be fearful of certain people. They play aggressively, hurting others. That might be behavior that they have seen or learned. They have extreme nervousness or jumpiness, again, maybe because they are being physically abused. They're wearing long-sleeve shirts or things of that nature in very hot weather. Again, a child might be trying to hide that information from you. Or they might even have difficulty walking, reaching, or sitting, depending on how severe the injuries are. Now, of course, not all children are possibly going to have injuries that you can see, so physical abuse isn't always a 100% detectable crime. This next slide, I'm going to go ahead and pre-warn you. It's the only slide that I have that is slightly graphic. It does show some physical injuries to children, but the only way that I can show you what to look for is by simply showing you, hey, here's some examples of things that you might see if you work with children. Some of the children in these slides are actors. Maybe makeup or things of that nature have been used. So I just wanted to kind of pre-warn you. And then again, this is the only slide that I have that tends to show, children in situations that we don't like to see. So here are the examples of physical abuse. Now, the top corner you see unexplained bruises, and this was the example I gave you, where you have a small infant child, 6 to 9 months old, and he has bruising all over his rear end. There's really no reason for that. It's kind of unexplained. So that would be a huge concern if you were changing a diaper or helping a child of this age, and something that you should suspect at that time is possibly child abuse. Of course, black eyes. Children normally do not have black eyes. Sometimes a baseball might hit them or things of that nature, but that's also a concern and a possible sign that physical abuse could be occurring. Now, whips and slashes on the body, of course we know that a child should not have that. And so if you were to see those types of markings, definitely cause for concern. I put a slide on here about cigarette burns because that's also a way that sometimes adults will abuse children, is they will put their cigarette out on them because they're in their way or they're angry, and that's what they have in their hand at the time. And so they're circular, and it's a burn, and they can be anywhere on the child. But again, that's something that you might not think to look for, but it's the circular size of a cigarette, and that's something that we often do see in the realm of child abuse. Now, head injuries. Of course, this child in the middle slide, that is a really bad bruise. And so unless a parent is telling you we were in a horrific car accident, some sort of reasonable explanation, there's no reason for a child of that age to have a bruise that serious. Just today, I had to pick up children and put them into custody because a child presented at a local hospital with an injury very similar to this, and he was of a similar age. So it was kind of weird that here I'm presenting on it, and then today on my computer they had sent me pictures just like this little boy. The last picture that I used, and this is a common injury that we'll see for physical abuse of children, is a hand mark or a slap print, and a lot of times it's across the child's face. So anytime you see red marks with white lines that could be the print of a hand, oftentimes that means that the child was slapped. They're pretty detectable because of the type of mark that a hand leaves. But again, that's something that if you're working in a nursery or working around small children, that you should look for. A handprint is pretty identifiable. Another injury that I want to talk to you before moving on is what's commonly been known in the past as shaken baby syndrome. These days they try to call it abusive head trauma, but it's basically when a parent or a caregiver gets frustrated because of a crying baby, and they will shake a baby. And because a baby's head is still developing and their brain is still expanding, their brain is like jello inside, and it just hits back and forth and back and forth. And what it can cause that you can look for, and it was too graphic, I didn't want to put it on here, but a baby will have petechiae often in the white parts of their eyes. And so those are red lines where those blood vessels have busted. A lot of times those types of children that have received that injury will not shy away from bright lights, like if they're out in the sun, they won't blink. They'll often just kind of stare and like no one's home because they had this injury that needs to be taken care of. So if you're ever working with an infant child and an eye will wander off and they just seem like absolutely no one's there, they don't blink, they don't flinch, or they have the petechiae, that of course is possibly suspected child abuse and something you should look further into or possibly call DHS. All right, so we've talked about physical abuse, but tonight we're going to focus on sexual abuse. And the reason being is, as a church or as an organization, there are sexual predators that are attracted to children. And this is a topic that none of us really like to talk about. But we have to talk about it in order to be aware of what's going to happen or what could happen. And then how are we going to protect our children from this? So if we focus on sexual abuse, the first thing that I need to tell you is what the law is. What is lewd molestation? That's a term that you'll commonly hear in the legal field, and it's to look upon or touch the body or private parts of a child under 16 in a lewd or lascivious manner. So it's any sort of sexual touching, okay? There's also a lewd proposal, and that gets just as much punishment as a lewd molestation charge. And it's where you make a lewd or an indecent proposal to a child under 16 to have unlawful sexual relations or sexual intercourse with another person. So just asking the child to do these sorts of things, the law considers just as heinous because of the things that you're suggesting them to do. Now, if you work with older children, ages 16 to 18, if they're ever touched inappropriately, that's going to fall under a charge called sexual battery, unless they are inside a school system. If it is inside a school system, the law protects that aged child until they're 19 years old. And it's because persons in authority over children should not try to engage in any sort of relationship with them. So even if an 18-year-old high school student technically has the right to choose, not when it's a public official working in that school system that has authority over them, okay? So a coach, a principal, anyone in that school district cannot have a sexual relationship with the child. I want to show you next a video and explain to you that child predators can look and act like everyone else. They don't have to have the bottle-thick glasses and look really weird and scary. They can be anyone, anywhere. So let's watch this video.
I am a child predator. I could be anyone, anywhere. I'm a stranger that lives in your neighborhood, or a member of your church, even a parent, a relative, friend of one of your school children. I may be a youth volunteer, a teacher, a pastor. I look and act like others around me. And I'm only a click away on the internet.
I'm a child predator. Many underestimate the number of female predators. And when we are caught, the courts are often lenient. You've seen the reports. We too are teachers, parents, church volunteers. Without a criminal record, we are hard to detect and find. Pay close attention. I'm not far away.
Many places make it easy for us to slip in. No background or reference checks, no 6-month rules that try to weed us out, no supervision rules or guidelines that prevent adults from being alone with children. On or off site, if I'm there, your child is at risk.
How is your security? Can you see everyone who enters your daycare center or school? Sabbath school teachers are usually too busy teaching their classes to be concerned with who might be lurking in their corridors.
Think of a door without a window. Now, a lot can happen there without anything ever being seen. These are the doors I hate. I have to be extra cautious with this much visibility. Although, nothing is impossible. But we love covered windows. Makes everything so much easier. We just tell a child we need to talk to them in private for a moment. Close the door. No rules. No visibility.
Without good perimeter fencing, anyone can walk onto your property. And when there are neighboring woods, everything gets easier. Now there are new distractions. Think you can text and supervise children well at the same time? News reports say otherwise.
You're probably wondering how old I was when I started. I was a bit of a bully on the playground. Nobody ever did anything. Take a look at the statistics sometime. You may be surprised. Do you get the point? I like churches. I like schools, camps, places without rules, anywhere with lousy security. Are you prepared to keep me out?
Let me give you a few more statistics to kind of enlighten you about how common sexual abuse is. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys are sexually abused before turning 18. That is a current statistics. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys. That is a lot of children. The median age for reporting sexual abuse in children is 9 years old. Most children never report abuse. If a child does report, it is rare for a child to lie about sexual abuse. And I know that many of you might have thought, well, goodness, oh, children will lie about anything. I have prosecuted for over 10 years, and I can recall 3 cases in 10 years in which a child wasn't necessarily telling the truth. And I worked on probably 5 cases a week. It just rarely happens that children lie about sexual abuse. 2 of those cases involved a child custody matter. So on occasion, a parent will coach another child or coach the child to say something. But most of the time, children will not lie about sexual abuse. More than 90% of children know their abuser, so it's not stranger danger necessarily. 90% know who this person is. 1 in 5 children are sexually solicited while on the internet. So again, concern for our children who these days have iPhones and access to the internet. 1 in 5 children will be solicited on there. Sexually abused children who keep it a secret or who tell and are not believed are at greater risk than the general population for psychological, emotional, social, and physical problems lasting well into adulthood. If a child were to come to you and disclose sexual abuse, it's best for you to just listen, and then, of course, call police or call a person like DHS that can handle that investigation. Because if you were to tell the child, well, I don't know if I believe you, that will shut that child down, and they will not continue to tell what has been happening to them. It's hard for a child to come out and tell, and so if you're ever in that situation, again, just call a professional and let them take it from there, and just simply tell the child, thank you for telling me, you're not in trouble, and we're going to get somebody to help you, okay? Now, the video that we just watched brings up several good points. One that I'd like to talk to you about is that females can sexually abuse children. I will tell you that 96% of child sexual abusers are men. On occasion, it can be a female. And in the 10 years that I've prosecuted approximately 3 women, probably close to 1,000 men. But those 3 women were usually older children, a teacher with a student, or a parent who had a 15-year-old boy, and she had a relationship with one of the children's friends. And then I had one grandma that had touched a 10-year-old child. That was her grandson. So most of the abuse is going to be, like the statistic says, 96% are men. But in regards to females, just like the video pointed out, you've seen it in the news, and a lot of times it's in the school system with the older age children. The question that one of the predators asked was, how is your security? Do you have any in place? So again, food for thought. Do you have windows in your doors so that there's visibility to the children inside? If you close blinds to windows, he stated, I love that. You just simply shut the door and you invite the child in. One of the most serious cases I had was where a principal was bringing a child into the office with the door shut and the blinds pulled, and abuse would occur in the office while everyone else was functioning outside. But because you're not supposed to interrupt the principal as he's disciplining a child, the abuse would occur time and time again. Another thing that she mentioned on the video was texting. We do have new distractions in today's day and age, and so those are things that if you work in an organization that you want to talk to your employees about, is that you should always have your eyes on the children, because texting or technology can take your eyes away. The predator simply stated, I like places without rules. Now, the video gave us lots of ideas about what predators are looking at, but we still might have questions about, well, who are these people going to be? Who are we going to look for? So next, I'd like to talk to you about, well, who would sexually abuse a child? And I've touched briefly on it by telling you that 96% of child sexual abusers are men. I've told you how children usually know their abuser, 90% of them do. 30 to 40% of children are abused by family members. Nearly 40% are abused by older or larger children. There have been situations in smaller churches where I have prosecuted like a 17-year-old boy through a juvenile delinquency petition where he was playing hide and seek and all the children were playing together. So you had young children with old children. That can be a bad situation for those younger children, because this particular boy said, let's go hide in here. It's a great place to hide. He was able to get the child alone, and then a molestation occurred there. So I would encourage you, based off of this statistic and also my own experience, that 40% can be abused and are abused by older and larger children. So that's something that you'll need to watch for and possibly try to keep the children separated and in their appropriate age ranges. More than 50% of victims of older children are under 12. So again, it's the smaller children that they usually manipulate and trick into coming over to where they're at. 70 to 80% of serial rapists report that they were sexually abused as a child. Most offenders have between 1 and 9 victims, and 20% have 10 to 40 victims. Often when I'm prosecuting a case, I'll have a defense attorney come up to me and they'll say, well, they don't have a previous record, so let's just give them some minor probation. This was just a one-time mishap. Statistics tell you otherwise, and that's because it usually takes 1 to 9 victims before they're caught. So this is a crime of secrecy. Most children don't tell, so they're not always, and actually most of the time, they're not going to have a criminal record. People who abuse children can also, of course, act godly, and they will go out of their way to appear trustworthy, and this is to gain access to the children. Predators are often married and have their own children. A majority of offenders, again, do not have a criminal record. They often attract children by being playful, fun, or buying things for that child. And once they build this trust and abuse the child, they use tactics to keep the child from telling. And again, like I've said, most children never tell. So if they build this trust, exactly how does sexual abuse start? Let me play this video and it will explain.
So how do sexual predators get our children in the American church? Well, the process is called grooming, or it can also be called seducing. But it can be summed up in one word: trust.
This process is very slow and very methodical of gaining their trust, and once they gain that trust, they can achieve their sadistic goals. They start off by trying to find an area and a need that they can fill, like, for example, a teacher or a mentor or a coach. There's a very clear biblical example of this type of thing happening in the book of Genesis between the serpent and Eve, another very well-known story where the serpent waits for an opportunity when Eve is alone, isolated, and then he moves in and automatically starts manipulating and lying and deceiving, and that deception is key. So this is the same exact thing that happens to victims of sexual abuse.
Right, it's gradual and it's deceptive. So it usually starts off by a friendship of some sort, and they'll befriend even a family member, they'll befriend a single mom, they'll do whatever they can do to get close to the child. They can start a relationship with whoever they need to start a relationship with to get close to the child. And it can start off with non-sexual touch.
Right, they're using this process to push their boundaries, but also to break down the child's defenses slowly over time, so that the child more and more trusts this person that they think will not hurt them at all.
One of the things that a predator does is also get the child to feel a little bit of empowerment, that they're trusted like an adult. Every child wants to be an adult, and every teenager wants to be an adult, and they kind of feel like, oh wow, an adult trusts me. Wow, this is kind of neat. And this is all just to get their fangs in the children.
Once they gain this trust, they begin their attack. The secrets that they've been building up to this point builds up to the big secret of you cannot share this abuse. The child is kept in control and kept quiet through manipulation.
Right, and they use many different tactics, but to sum them up, it's guilt and fear.
Okay, so they've kind of told us how it starts and how they build this trust with this child. But often, and I've heard it time and time again, either by jurors or other persons that don't know much about sexual abuse, they say, well, why didn't the child tell? Why didn't they scream? Why didn't they run away? You know, there's all sorts of questions that we have on why children behave the way they do. So the next slide basically is going to tell you, why don't children tell? And first of all, some of the younger children don't actually know it's wrong. If they're being raised in that environment or someone tells them it's a game, they have an innocent nature, a clean slate. They know nothing about sexual activity or inappropriate touching. Parents have never discussed it with them. They don't know it's wrong. So sometimes they just don't know. I've had children disclose abuse when their parents say, oh, a stranger comes to the door. Don't answer the door. Don't you know they could come in here and touch you in places they're not supposed to touch? and a parent finally breaks the ice and has enough confidence to talk to the child about it. And one child that I had particularly broke down. She says, well, Grandpa's been doing that to me. But if you'll just simply have a conversation with your children in an age-appropriate way, and let them know they're in charge of their bodies and no one is supposed to touch them in places where their swimsuit goes. You can say it however gently that you'd like, but sometimes we just need to educate our children that they can't be touched in certain places. So often they don't tell because they might not know that it's wrong. Sometimes predators will scare them. They will tell them that I'm going to hit you, I'm going to kill you. They'll often say some mean things, and children believe that that could happen. Sometimes predators will pick a child that asks for attention or that has issues or is in trouble all the time. They'll pick the appropriate victim that they think won't tell. And so they'll tell that child, if you tell, no one's going to believe you. You're in trouble all the time. So again, that's a reason that children often keep it a secret. Sometimes children blame themselves. They might love the abuser, and they're confused. They'll feel tremendous shame about what's been going on. They might be scared they're going to get in trouble. Maybe they are a latchkey kid, and after school they go home, and they're supposed to stay inside the apartment. But the neighbor has been talking to them, and they've been leaving, and they're not supposed to. Well, sometimes children are scared they're going to get in trouble, so they don't tell what happened to avoid getting in trouble. And one of the other reasons are that they might kill or get rid of a family pet. And children often love animals, and that has been an excuse. Many children have told me, I was scared he would kill my kitty. You know, I was scared that this was going to happen. And just to enlighten the mood, I have a picture of Honey Boo Boo up here with her pet pig. And that's a whole nother topic on whether that child might be a deprived child. But again, there's Honey Boo Boo with her pet pig. And again, I showed you some graphic images, so I tried to show you maybe something that would be a little more enlightening. All right, the next slide that I want to talk to you about are, well, are there any signs of sexual abuse that I can look for? If I'm a daycare worker, if I'm a Boy Scout or Girl Scout leader, what kind of signs am I going to be looking for? The child could display a change in behavior, and of course that's like any situation, whether it be a death in the family. Oftentimes when something serious is going on in a child's life, they will have a change in behavior. But a big red flag is when that change in behavior involves sexual actions, okay? If a child ever displays knowledge about sex or inappropriate touching that they should not have at their age, that is a big red flag. I had some of the cases that I've worked on, maybe 4- and 5-year-old children would come up and rub themselves against someone's foot as the person sits in a recliner. But they will reenact sometimes things that have been done to them. And so that's a huge red flag and should cause you major concern. Sometimes children display a lot of anger. They have drops in grades. They might have unexplained injuries or even genital infections. Sometimes little girls will get yeast infections or urinary tract infections, and that can be normal. They can get those from bubble baths and things of that nature. But that is a possible sign that something has been going on, and it's just enough for you to pay attention as a parent to make sure that it's just something that the child naturally got and not something from inappropriate touching. I have had children with STDs, and that is a huge red flag because those are supposed to just be received from sexual activity. So a 2-year-old with genital warts should not occur. And those are, of course, cases that we look into and prosecute. A child might revert back to bedwetting or poop or pee their pants. So if you have a 5- or 6-year-old child reverting back to what they did when they were 2, again, something that you should look into. Some children show depression, anxiety, but many children are not going to show any signs. Maybe they don't know it's wrong, they're confused. Many children are not going to show you any signs. But once a child is sexually molested, this damage can last a lifetime. 70 to 80% of sexual abuse survivors report excessive drug and alcohol use. These are the things that we want to avoid by helping save a child from abuse. Young girls who are sexually abused are more likely to develop eating disorders during adolescence. Victims of sexual abuse are more likely to be sexually promiscuous. More than 60% of teen first pregnancies are preceded by experiences of sexual abuse. Major depressive disorder is frequent among victims of sexual abuse. Victims of sexual abuse have more physical health problems. Victims of sexual abuse report more post-traumatic stress disorder, sadness, and school problems. Probably the worst case of post-traumatic stress disorder that I have seen is a 10-year-old child that stopped speaking. She had quit speaking around the age of 3. The mother took her to the doctor. They couldn't figure out why. Eventually, by age 11, when her parents divorced and she had to go for visitation on a weekend basis and he had more access to her, she finally wrote a note to someone, 3 or 4 sentences of what was going on in her life. And that was a case that I'll never forget because it's a tough case to prosecute. You have a witness who doesn't talk. But she was able to, when I'd ask a question, write at least a sentence answer and someone would read it. And then we have dolls that the child can actually demonstrate the behavior that was done to them. And through the use of those anatomical dolls, she was able to show the jury what happened. And of course, when a jury hears about someone hurting a child in that manner and they believe that child, they send that person away. And in that particular case, her father received life. This child is now slowly starting to talk, inviting to birthday parties. She's getting to interact with her peers, things that she never got to enjoy because of the sexual abuse that had occurred all her life. So again, a wide range of symptoms, signs, or results that can occur from sexual abuse. Next, I'd like us to watch a video, and it's about a survivor. She's a former Miss America. Her name is Marilyn Van de Buur Alter, and she actually received a Lifetime Achievement Award. Throughout her video, she'll sometimes talk about a book or what she does now. Those aren't the reasons I'm, of course, playing the video, but I'm just trying to show you that it can happen across any rich or poor, well-educated parents, maybe those that aren't. It doesn't matter. Sexual abuse can occur to anyone in any type of situation at any place. So let's watch this survivor's story.
I think it started on what I believed to be the worst day of my life. I was 53, and a reporter with the Denver Post learned that my father had come into my room at night when I was 5, and that it didn't stop until I was 18. I'd had a really brutal recovery. I had night terrors every night until I was 51. I had horrific flashbacks. I had a complete breakdown in my 40s. I was hospitalized 4 times. But people didn't know. People didn't know. As long as people don't know. And then you look at the Denver Post, and it's on the front page, and everybody knows. It's over. All the success I had worked for, it's over. Larry drew the shades, and we just sat there. And the phone rang, and a woman said, "You need to have a press conference." I said, "Never." She said, "They'll call your mother and your sisters." I said, "What time is the press conference?" The next day it was on both papers' front page. The third day, both papers' front page. Larry, Jennifer, and I went out. We just had to get some air. And a woman stopped me, and she said, "We're so proud of what you're doing, Marilyn, but yesterday, on our most popular radio talk show, some people were calling in to say they didn't believe you." I was stunned. I looked at her and I said, if people are not going to believe 53-year-old me, then who is going to believe a child? That was life-changing for me. I went home, I called the newspapers, TV stations. I said, let's get to work. And the mail came in mail bags. People were knocking at my door. The Kemp Center called and said, we cannot answer the hundreds of people who are calling. So I called my retired youth minister and I said, gird up your loins. We have to get to work. We saw up to 500 people a week for 3 years at no charge. And I began speaking. I've spoken in over 500 cities, and you do the newspaper interview first, educate, educate, educate. 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys will be violated before the age of 18. And the fundraiser to raise money for the Children's Center, and then speak. I always ask survivors to stand, but the one thing that I can do is to give hope. When someone emails me, they know I have been to the bottom of the well, and they know I came up. And what I can tell them is, you can do this. It's doable if, that's the word, if you're willing to do the work of healing. And they'll email back and say, well, I can't confront my father because, well, we need to do the work of healing. Sometimes you think you're going to die and you do it anyway. The name of the book is Miss America by Day. And I'm glad I waited 11 years. I never really thought about writing a book. But the more I traveled and the more I listened and the more educating I knew I could do, it became extremely important to me. We don't know how to stop a man like my father, but we do know how to stem the tide of teenagers inappropriately touching younger or less powerful children, and we do it by talking to them. They have no idea they can be causing literally a lifetime of pain. And you know what's exciting? Parents go home and they talk to their kids. Someone asked me if I would choose what happened to me to be able to do what I'm doing today. It was way too hard. But this is the hand I was dealt, and it is an unbelievable privilege to be able to reach out, especially online, and just on a daily basis, just be able to give someone some hope for tomorrow. My life has been so richly blessed.
All right, so that's basically her story, and today she's simply trying to reach out and raise awareness. And that's what this talk, of course, is about. Now, hopefully you're aware of how serious sexual abuse can be. And so let's move forward to the prevention side of what can I do to help? What can I, as a single person, just a parent, just a grandparent, just a member of this community, what can I do to help? And one of the first things, of course, is that April is Child Abuse Awareness Month. So next you might see that I'm wearing a blue ribbon. I have those available in the foyer, and of course you can take one. And if you wear that the month of April, you're at least raising awareness. And if someone sees the blue ribbon, they might ask you. And if we at least talk about it and continue to be aware that things like this can happen, then we're educating and we're trying to keep it from happening to more children. Another thing that you could do is wear blue to work on April the 10th. So that's just a few days away. But again, that's the day they've picked this year to, again, raise awareness about child abuse. Another thing is, don't get lost in the facts that I gave you tonight. We can't look back in anger about maybe some of the pictures or some of the things that I've talked about, nor look forward in fear. We can't be scared about this possibly might happen to a child. But if we look around in awareness, and we just simply are aware, and we do our best to protect children in each day, then that is something that you can do as a person. Next, a thing that you could do, of course, is report child abuse. We all know now that we have a duty, and just by reporting, you're helping a child get out of a bad situation and help stop this lifetime of damage that Miss America, the former Miss America, had talked about. And then lastly, one of the things that you might see are pinwheels. For April, you'll see a lot of blue, and that again is just for awareness. As you drive around, especially big cities, you should see blue pinwheels, and it's just, again, for child abuse awareness. So if you did one of these things, little OU can at least raise awareness, and that right there can help make a small difference. Now, you might say, well, I want to do more. The facts that you've given me tonight are really scary, and our children don't deserve that. So can I do anything else to raise awareness? And the answer is yes. If you are aware of your surroundings based off of the facts and statistics that I've told you, then you need to trust your instincts and trust yourself. For instance, here at our church, we have a policy that 2 adults should be with children at all times. And that's, again, what's in the best interest of that child and what's in the best interest of that worker, so no one might assume that something is going on inappropriately. So if you were to walk around the church and you were to see a classroom with just one teacher and one parent, or I'm sorry, one teacher and one child, stop in. Just say, hey, I realize church policies we're supposed to have two, so I'm just here to protect you, and we'll wait for your other teacher to get here. Now, I will tell you that our youth staff are awesome in that area, and hopefully you won't ever see that occur. But if you do, that's something that you can trust yourself, trust your instincts. And by doing that, you've empowered yourself to go into that situation and, again, tell the person you're protecting them and the child. No one's accusing anyone of anything. It's just what's in the best interest of our children so that they won't be harmed by those predators that will possibly try to get into our church or our organization. And then lastly, just as a person, you can have unyielding compassion for children. And simply what I'm telling you is, if you love children, then have that ability to always put their needs first. An unyielding compassion that children are, of course, a gift from God. I'm going to do what I can do to make sure it's always in their best interest. And so if that means speaking up, if that means standing out just a little bit, then go for it, because those children have no one else to protect them besides us as the adults around them. Now, further, we can do a little more. Once you've made that commitment, I'm going to be that type of person that a child can have as a protector. I'm going to be brave enough and step into those situations and protect children. Well, once you have made that commitment, as an organization, a church, the Boy Scout, the Girl Scout leader, anyone who is involved with working with children, you need to implement 3 steps. You need to make policy and talk about it. Here at our church, again, I've looked over all of their policy and procedures. I've worked in the youth department, and I'm very proud to report to you that our church is very active in this area, and I have no concerns. We have policy. Policy is that two adults must be with children at all times. No diaper changes by men workers, or men workers are not allowed to have a child sit on their lap. Now you might say, gosh, that's going a little far. But if we are trying to keep child predators out, really what man is going to be upset that he doesn't get to change a dirty diaper? I know at my house with a 10-month-old, in the beginning my husband would say, oh, I just don't know how to do it, and can you help me? So sure, I'll do it. And then he got to saying, you're better at it. You're better at it. And so eventually I learned and giggled, and I said, you just don't want to do it. And he revealed that that was really the truth, but it worked for a long time that he would just tell me I was better at it. It made me feel good, so of course I did that. But I don't think any man's going to be upset that he can't change the diaper. So, that's something that we have. I have had cases where sexual predators who are placed on probation, they have to take a polygraph test every 3 months. And if they fail that test, that's grounds to revoke their probation. And I have had sexual predators come in, and when they're asked a particular question about have you been around minor children, yes, I've been changing my grandchildren's diapers, things of that nature. And they will admit, because if you admit what you're doing, you're less likely to get sent to prison. And they'll say, I am aroused by changing a child's diaper. It does exist, and I don't say that to be gross, but I'm saying that to educate you. Most of us don't think that way, but those people who are child predators do. And so if we keep our children safe from that situation, then we're doing a good job. So again, the church has those types of policies. Same with sitting on the lap. Of course, child predators can get aroused by that situation. So let's just not have it, and we don't have to worry about it. So if a child predator were to happen to come into our church, they're going to know that's our policy. And they're going to know that we have a hostile environment, that child predators are not welcome here. We have rules, we have security, and they're going to find somewhere else to go. Another policy that we have here at our church is to stand outside the bathroom when waiting on a child to go to the bathroom. You are not to go in with the child. If the child has an emergency, then you must get a same-sex worker to go in with that child. And again, that is comforting to me as a parent to know that my church is doing everything they can to make sure my child will never be put in a negative situation. So, again, first step, make policy, talk about it, have your workers, have your employees initial off that they realize those are the rules, and explain to them we're simply doing it because it's in the best interest of children. Number 2, minimize opportunity. More than 80% of sexual abuse occurs in one adult, one child situations. So if this is the only thing that you learn from this presentation is to minimize opportunity, then you have learned a very important rule. Because if 80% of abuse occurs in that situation, you are making a major difference. So in our church, if you're to pray with a child or you're doing something that you want to be private, you still can't leave the room. You just go over to a corner or you go over to a private section and you continue to do what you need to do and work with that child. If outside our church you work in an organization and you must separate to where it's one adult and one child, make a rule that it is always observable and interruptible. So just like the principal example that I gave you, where he would go in a closed door and shut the door, he could open the blinds, he could keep the door open, he could ask another person to come in. As long as it's observable to the outside world and it's interruptible in that you have a policy where don't come in here if I'm talking with a child, always be able to interrupt so that way that person knows they could get caught. So that is a second step as an organization that you should implement in order to keep children safe. And last, act on your suspicions. If you walk in and someone's sitting on someone's lap, go ahead and say, "Oh, honey, let's go ahead and get up and change the subject, do something." And inform the worker, "I'm just trying to protect you." But do something or say something. Don't be an ostrich where you stick your head in the sand, because when it comes to sexual abuse or possibly suspecting something, I know especially in the church we don't want to do that. We want to love all, accept all, but we have to put our children first. And so again, do something, say something, and then of course report it to Katrina or one of the youth workers so that they can address it, okay? Now, if you take these steps, whether it be in your own organization or if you're here volunteer at the church, those are important steps that we are going to take and that we do take at Cornerstone that keep our children safe. And so on behalf of the children here in our community and at Cornerstone, I want to say thank you, and thank you, because child abuse can cause a lifetime of issues, but together we can make a difference. And I hope that this presentation has at least empowered you to be aware and to go out and help protect our children by making sure that they're not alone and the other steps that we've talked about. In the foyer, there are some ribbons. I think I told you that. Feel free to take one. And again, it's in remembrance of Child Abuse Awareness Month, and you can wear that the month of April. And last, I just want to leave you with a Bible verse. It's Matthew 18:6, and it basically says, "If anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea." And of course, a child molester, a child predator, is a huge stumbling block, because what do they try to gain but the trust of the child? And what are we trying to get? The child to trust in God. So child molesters are nothing but a stumbling block. And the Bible clearly tells us that those types of people are better off drowned. And so I just want to encourage you to always put children first. Let's always remember what's in their best interest. And again, we're trying to keep stumbling blocks away from our children. Thank you.